or reach out to any of these lovely ladies, and they would let you know how to find me. So today's agenda, we're gonna talk about thresholds. Basically, what thresholds mean is a limit, a not to exceed amount per contract instrument. Because what the government does, they use what they call, we refer to it as instrument, as a contract award. That could be a purchase order, that could be a full contract award. So we're gonna talk about the different thresholds. And then we talked about the RFQs versus RFPs. All that will make sense as we go into the presentation. Now, the biggest thing is, of course, the request for proposal, which we refer to as RFPs, which this is part of your homework. So the RFP is the mother of all government instruments in answering to an ad or answering to something that you're interested. And then we're gonna also talk a little bit about special conditions, and also that includes the terms and conditions that you always have to be so careful when you're putting a bid together. So how far can your business go, right? So we're gonna discover the secrets of government contracting threshold. And as we go in, and I would recommend, where you start when you just starting out, even if you've been in business for 5-6 years and have never done business with the government. So that's mean that you're in the novice stage of government contracting. So those thresholds, they're really helpful because they help you get your past performance. So pretty much we're gonna guess how many number of, can anybody guess how many number of thresholds that the federal government has? And we're talking local. When you're talking federal contracting, right, that's your local and your state and federal. They pretty much use the same methods of contracting. So I'm gonna let either Tina or Nikki monitor the chat for me and see if there's any questions that we have to stop and answer. So there are mainly 3 groups that the government purchases under. So we have what we call a micro purchase. And by the way, I'm manifesting a couple of micro purchases by the end of the year for me, because I've never really had like a direct government contract. And as we go through, you're gonna see the micro purchase is really the best way to go through, especially folks that have products versus the service. The products are usually a lot more under that. Then you have your simplified acquisition. So your simplified acquisition are usually what the government use as a blanket agreement, for example, meaning that they negotiate a main contract instrument with you. And if it's a multi-year contract, all they do is give you the order of what they need. Now, all of these thresholds have to do with a certain dollar threshold, which we'll cover. And of course, cost and pricing data thresholds. So you have your request for proposal. I'm sorry, I'm going too fast. The request for quote, they basically have to do with the cost of that item. Your request for proposal, they want both cost and technical. So the difference between these 3, micro purchase, usually there's not much many technical terms. They will tell you exactly what they want and you're gonna deliver. And usually they like to have more than 1 bid, but a minimum of 2, because the government has to write the justification that the best price prevail. And now also remember, let's say if I bidding for something and somebody else bidding, the fact that I'm a certified minority woman, even if my score is half a point or equal to that other company, the chances of me getting that purchase order is much higher, because they get to check 2 boxes with me. And so we'll move on to the next section. So again, we talked about the 3 groups. We're gonna start with our micro purchase, right? The set aside threshold. So they usually these contracts are involved in reserving certain contracts exclusively for small businesses, so they can encourage small businesses to be part of the bidding process, because you know, they'll break down. I remember back in the days, if we get a scope and we know that there's so many small certified businesses in that category, they allow us to break the statement of work, so we can assign it, you know, make it a smaller contract so it can fit different sizes. So micro purchase threshold. What is a micro purchase threshold? It's definitely the threshold is a not to exceed amount, period. So meaning that, let's say if the threshold, for example, in your category is $10,000, the government can choose to give you one purchase order at $10,000, or it could be $9,000, $4,000, and then, you know, oh no, so I'm sorry, it could be $3,000, $4,000, so that's 7, and then another 2 to make another 3 to make it the 10,000. So it's a not to exceed, is the maximum purchase price that can be for that purchase order. So for micro purchase threshold, for supplies, construction services, professional services, and non-professional. So meaning that the government buying everything, you can find micro purchases for the different levels of stuff. As I said, supplies are usually the better thing for instead of a service, because the supplies, they would tell me, you know what, I want this black pen with the gold emblem and I want it this way. So that's what I'm delivering. So they're pretty specific with what they're asking for. So the micro purchases for supplies, they recently up it to $10,000. And I always tell somebody, think about it. If you get like 5 or 6 $10,000, you know, micro purchase, that's 60,000 in sales, you know. So don't look at it as a small type of vehicle, where it would also allow you to build up your past performance. The reason I'm putting the FAR 2.101, FAR means Federal Acquisition Regulations. This is the Bible of government contracting. Everything the government does, and the FARs are like big volume documents. That's why they're specific in giving you the part, in giving the parts and the number. So for example, if I did supplies, I would go and start reading this FAR reference, FAR 2.101, so you can understand all the supplies and understand all the requirements that the government has under this, you know, for supplies. So some examples of it are, you know, office supplies, computers, computer peripherals, cleaning supplies. So these are all the stuff that the government, other products required for official government use, anything for government use that they can, you know, purchase under the micro purchase order, because it helps them administratively. It's less work for them. It's basically a purchase order. And the best thing for us small businesses is like, you don't have to wait 30 days to get paid, like your most contracting method, right? This one, you send the box of pens if they want 1,000. So they count 1,000. They make sure that all the requirements are made properly. Once upon acceptance, they release your payment. And now that the government is using something called a P card, which is a credit card for them. So your money can be deposited within a week of delivery. So that's what's really sweet about these kinds of contract vehicle. So the next one we could look at is construction. You say, wow, construction's only 2,000. Why? Because a lot of these, sometimes they don't require your general contractor's license. Excuse me, like a handy person can do it, because it's usually, you know, when they say building a structure, it's not like, you know, it's like probably just putting up the drywall. So, you know, repairing a hole or something, or street lighting, a leak, and something like that. So it's nothing like your big construction contract that would require the bonding that they're gonna talk about on Friday, and also require insurance. Usually these are like very small jobs that they need you to come in and patch up a room, a conference room, and then the it's 2,000. For construction, your micro purchase cannot exceed 2,000. And so our next micro purchase threshold is for services, right? So services, they look at professional and non-professional services. So this is pretty much what services. Again, they give you the FAR number, 37.101. So that's mean FAR Part 37, Section 101 will define exactly if you have a professional or non-professional service. Please get familiar with this FAR reference, because it would help you clarify everything that you're supposed to know. Because the reason that the government gives you everything, that's because they turn it over to you. When it's time for you to respond, you can say, oh my God, I didn't know this, I didn't understand. That's on you. They can help you with, ignorance is not, like we used to tell people, ignorance is not an excuse, So on non-professional services, as you can see, the threshold on this is $2,500. However, that is subject to the labor standard, right, service contract labor law. So there are certain commodities, right, that Department of Labor has something to do, just like in construction, you have your Davis-Bacon Act, to make sure that the workers are being protected, with the with what you're paying them. What you're proposing that you're paying is what's really being paid to these people. So, your sales force is protected. And again, you have to make sure that when you read that purchase order, and they have all the references either to the FARs or maybe to certain regulations, take the time and read them so you can understand what you're signing to. Because once you accept and sign, you can say, oh my God, I didn't really understand that. I didn't have to do this. So examples of non-professional services would be, repair, servicing of your equipment, storage, custodial, janitorial, housekeeping is big on that, food service, your laundry, folks that are providing linen, trash or garbage removal. The drone thing is really big right now with the government. All this falls under your non-professional services. So, and when I go to professional, I can explain to you the difference. You see, for professional, it's up to 10,000, or ever it includes like your attorneys, A&E, your architect, engineer services, the chemist, your accountants. So what I like to call professional services, or things that are somewhat regulated by your state, because you have to have a certain license, like a CPA. You have to be, have that CPA thing. For attorney, you have to pass the bar exam, architect, engineering, and so on and so on. So I like to call it somewhat the folks that are regulated. That's where professional, services fall. Even though sometimes, I put myself on the professional services, because what I do is compliance, contract compliance and contracts management. But also it tells you that with the assistance of the contracting office or their legal counsel, they can clarify for you whether your services can fit into whatever. The first thing the government does is put out a request of what they need. So once you see a request, and if you're not sure whether this applies to you or not, that's why there's always this period where, they will have either pre-proposal conference or a pre-proposal call, or a period that you can reach out to your vendor or your contracting officer before they close it out to everything. I really highly, highly recommend that. First of all, if you're looking at government opportunities, try to look for the future opportunities, upcoming opportunities, because usually it tells you exactly the date that this contract, so let's say any contract that are expiring in 2024, especially by June 2024, if it's recurring services like your trash pickup, your window washing, whatever the government needs that you know, on an everyday thing, like in the schools, any kind of duties that has to be performed every day, they can afford to have a lap in these contracts. So what they would do, they would always open a way if they need to extend the current contractor in until they set up a new you know, a new contract method. So then you would also hear people say, oh my God, the government tend to use the same people over and over again. Well, guys, if people are not you know, responding to those bids, when the and oh, I go back to sources sought or request for information. There's something that every one of you, if you're registered as a vendor, again, if you don't register as a vendor, you don't need certification yet. The government does not know that you exist. So the vendor registration means that you have a profile on the entity database that show who you are, how long you've been in business, and exactly what you provide. So what they usually do, they would put either the commodity code or a keyword of what that service is they're looking for. And these companies will come up. Sometimes if I can determine whether there's small businesses or small certified businesses, they would send something called sources sought, and I can put that in the chat. And then also request for information. I highly super recommend. I'm sorry, Tina, you have your hand up?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat. Do you want to address it now or until the end?
Go ahead.
Yeah, it says, how much was the MPT for unprofessional services? I got 25K.
Okay, professional services?
Unprofessional services.
Unprofessional.
I don't know what she means by unprofessional.
Yeah, 2,500. And these numbers have just been released, so they updated them, even though they said 2022, 2020, but these are the latest numbers. Are we good? So to go back and remind you guys, if in your email you ever find something called sources sought, SOURCES, and sought, SOUGHT. So they're looking, it's like looking for sources, or request for information, RFI. It is critical. Whether you can do it or not, you answer to them, because these are the contracting officials trying to scatter out there and looking to see, are there any small businesses that are providing these kinds of services. And if it's a yes, they'll put it in the database. Or if it's something, if they have to put out a solicitation in the next 2 to 3 months, they can go back and say, look, there's about 5 or 6 more businesses that can give us this commodity. So that's when they put those goals in these contracts. Let's say if the contract is so big, it's like building a bridge, for example. I'm going to use Department of Transportation. That tend to so then Department of Transportation don't necessarily contract out to the small janitorial or trash removal person, to the small guy that transport fuel, to the logistics guy. But what they do, they impose on that big construction contract to the contractor that you have to have 25% of those total dollars go to a small business. Now, from my experience, unless the construction company has worked with you before, they usually don't trust a small company with their construction scope. But everything else on that contract, and that could be the pre-construction cleanup, the post-construction cleanup, maybe you know, the finishes, anything that, you know, because remember, for a $1.2 million contract, if they have to meet 20 to 25% of those goals, meaning 20 to 25% of that total contract amount has to be contracted to a small, not 2A, but sometimes they get 2 or 3 small certified firms to make up the 20%, because they would be in non-compliance of their contract if they don't if they don't meet those goals. So what we're saying here is, so they increase the threshold from 3,500 to 10,000. So that's for micro purchases. Like I said again, like I was, for example, with Miami-Dade, I was also trying, every meeting I go with them, what are you guys using for your micro purchases? Because I've never seen them advertised. So the one thing they shared is they do it through the pre-qualification pools. And that's something that I can add in when I'm doing my certification class, to explain to you guys. Pre-qualification pools are super important because they're usually 5-year pools where you're pre-qualified, and all the government does is pull out your company. If sometimes, depending if they have not done business with you in a year or so, you could have either won something big or whatever. They'll send to you a no declaration affidavit or no change affidavit, what they refer to it. Once you can certify that, yes, my company is the same, sometimes they'll ask you for updated taxes to make sure that you're still meeting the threshold of that small business. And so once you do that, the contract, because it's a revolving pool, that's what the pre-qualification pools are. So now we can go from micro purchase to simplified acquisition. Simplified acquisition, still, it's a method of procurement that's a little higher than your micro purchase. So they usually range from 150 to 250. Really, I would say 100,000. That's what I found online. So I reported that because the RFPs started at about 100,000. So anything under 250, we could say. Anything under 250. So simplified acquisition, meaning, again, as I said, if we're using the pre-qualification example, where you have been vetted already with everything, your insurance is in place, your cost is in place. So when they need that commodity, all they gotta do is give you a purchase order or work order with the quantity and what they need you to deliver. So it doesn't, you don't have to negotiate. You don't have to start writing a whole dissertation about your company, because they already have pre-vetted you and you're somewhat pre-qualified to be in that pool. So, and usually when they, again, the FAR, Federal Acquisition Regulation, this is what governs everything. That's what governs acquisition, procurement and acquisition in government world. The Federal Acquisition Regulations. I tell everybody, go ahead and Google that and start downloading. And please don't download the whole section. You can download what applies to your commodity. And as you're looking into the FARs, there's also like the sub-FARs. So what does that mean? Now, they have the DFARs. The DFARs only apply to defense contracts. And then you have your environmental FARs. Not only you have your general FARs language that applies to that contract, but anything environmental would be specific to what they want you to do, because all the regulations, by law, the government has to tell you everything before you go in and get involved with them. So, they have to be transparent as they want us to be. That's how they have to be with us. And usually all of these entities, whatever changes the government make, So all state and local entities. So we're talking or state of Florida, for example, any contract from the state. Local for us inside Florida, you would have your Miami-Dade County, Broward, West Palm, and Monroe. All government entities. And the Indian tribes, actually, they have their own their own specification, because they issue their own contracts. They have their own procurement method on the Indian tribes. Institution for higher education, for example, Florida International University, and even your nonprofit organizations, anything that has to do with federal dollars, all these entities have, are infected. So now, we talked about simplified acquisition a few slides ago. Usually your simplified acquisition falls under your RFQs. RFQ stands for request for quote. Usually is when they know the exact product or service that is needed. All they need is the price. So usually they would tell you, the square footage of what they want, the color of it, the name brand, all the details they've given to you. So it's and sometimes you get an invitation. So when we talked about the sources sought and request for information, the best thing to do is when you get an invitation to bid, right? So it's an ITB, it's called. So meaning that not everybody, that solicitation is not open to everybody. If I have not received, somebody's hand is up, 1 second. If I had not received an invitation, I would not be able to reply for that bid. Go ahead, please. Somebody has their hand up.
Yeah, so there is a question in a chat that says, how can we get into those pre-qualification pools?
Okay, again, I've been, it's Miami-Dade County. You have to monitor, like yesterday, when Adriana taught us, you have to have a focus. The government is the whole world, so you cannot chase the whole world. So once you do your market research, you have to focus on what agency or what entity are you gonna be, concentrating on. Miami-Dade County, I'm super familiar with the pre-qualification pools. But what I'm doing my research, what I've also learned is I happen to have a client that does furniture repair and build new furniture. Just as I started working with him, and I find that they just did a pre-qualification pool for the next 5 years. So they're all on the website. You can go pre-qualification pools and see, but only when it expires, and they open it up for you to be able to put in your credential and see if you can make that list. It's not open anytime that you want, which was disappointing. So you just have to be on the lookout. As I said, any contracts that are expiring in 2024, the government is obligated to start the procurement process. Because when we were putting bids out, we had to, go from 12 to 9 months. So let's say if I needed to have my service to give a award for that commodity, so this is what, September 2023. So by June 2024, or even close to September 2024, usually you start the process now, unless it's an RFQ or if it was the, simplified, but anything that is requiring, process to vet the company and to get everybody. So we gotta start a minimum of 9 months prior to when you actually need the service. So any questions? Okay. So again, like we said, I love RFQs because RFQ usually means that you know your product inside out, you know your market research, and you understand exactly how to price your product competitively, because all they're gonna tell you is I need 5,000 of these yellow pencils with the white or this is yellow actually, you know, with yellow and the lead, what kind of lead and what have you. As long as you're able to fulfill that, this is what the RFQ is, period. As I said, you know, it's always good to be invited to bid on a job, but you have to be in the system for them to know that you exist in order for them to invite you. So any questions on RFQs? So we're gonna move to the meat of the, again, you know, we put the, keep reminding you the 3 levels. So now we're gonna go to the request for proposal. The request for proposal is what you've always heard, you know, people, and it's not an easy method, you know, to write a request for proposal, because request for proposal is usually, you know, for the technical product or the service, and you have to understand exactly. So a request for a proposal, the way I see it, is like the government identifies either a request or need or void. And sometimes they think that that's the way it's supposed to be, but they know what is it that they want. Sometimes they don't understand the method of how I'm supposed to get this. They just know the end result. That's where us contractors, we professionals in our own rights, we can come in and demonstrate. And if anybody had a chance to review the RFP that was assigned yesterday, you would see the level of details that the government asked for in an RFP. And the best thing to do was the way Adriana broke it down. You answer exactly what they asked for. Don't go what had happened yesterday. They're not interested, because remember, you know, we have gotten up to 15 proposals at one time for a bid that we put out. And by law, we are obligated to look at every one of them. So, you know, 15 versus 3 or 4, that makes, you know, that makes a difference in the workload of that group. So, so what proposal also does is, you know, that's where it allows you the negotiation. So when the government is buying by negotiation, they usually would do the request for proposal, because they could go and negotiate each element and also what refers to as line items of that contract. So if you hear element of a contract or element of a contract or proposal or the line items, that's what it means. You know, literally what, you know, they can have multiple line items, but they're only negotiating this one, and every, you know, depending on what's not clear. So at the end of the day, the award is made, and award has to always be to the best proposal in terms of both technical content and price. And you're gonna see in RFPs, technical outweighs the price every time. I'm not saying to price yourself out of an opportunity, but the best technical response usually gets the highest points. And then you're gonna see at the end, where we have a little formula that the government used, that the price matters, but the price is such a lower you know, lower commodity in the terms of the technical, because all they want you to be able to come in and solve that problem that is identified in that RFP, right? So it's usually, as we said, when it's impossible to drive adequate specification or to fully describe the specific item. Remember, when they're able to describe the item specifically and know the quantity that they want, they go back to use the RFQ, because the RFQ is an easier method for them to use. And it's easier method for the contractors out there. And RFP is when, you know, it's usually for bigger type projects. So, you know, when the government buys by negotiation, So they usually use the procedures that are differ from seal bidding. So what is a seal bid? A seal bid is usually your RFQ, or it could even be a mini request for proposal, where they'll tell you to bring us your package in a seal container. Sometimes they have open, and I'm pretty sure if all of you have been in this for a little while, they will have open bid opening to the public, where they would literally open each thing to the public and read. For example, Clemencia Valdares Ltd. This is the amount. Barbara, this is the amount. Adriana, you know, they tell you the companies and what the amount are because it's public. It opens in the public. But buying by negotiation kind of authorize the government to, you know, massage the RFP before making an award, because nothing is final. Of course, the price and the proposal you put in is final. You can go back in and make any changes once you submit that proposal. However, there's for proposals, for example, the government can come back and ask for best and final package, where they'll look and say, you know what, maybe we'll move this line item here, or maybe we'll take this line item off and replace it. So usually they'll talk to the person that has you know, the best proposal for the award. So they usually have to is the 3 best proposals that they have to present, you know. So the one that is number 1 is where they start all these negotiation with, because believe it or not, sometimes the number 1 proposer does not get through, either if they can't give the bonding, if they can't give some kind of insurance, if they can't, you know, come up with a document. So what we do, we go to the second lowest bidder until we, you know, somebody can meet all the government is asking for, until the company, you know, we come to what we call a meeting of the minds before that award is signed. Because once the award is signed, meaning the contract is signed, you still don't do anything until you get a NTP, and it will tell you that in the contract. So let's say if you sign the award on Thursday night, please don't go and start partying on that contract dollars on Friday without having the notice to proceed. The notice to proceed can come the following Tuesday or Thursday, and notice to proceed is the authorization that you can start spending money, that you can start working on that proposal and billing them for whatever that commodity happened to be. And something that is super important, when the government put out an RFP, changes are made, something called addendum. If it's more than 1, it becomes addenda. So what this does is, let's say, for example, and I'm sure if some of you have seen it, where we put out an RFP, but we give a question period. So what we would do first and foremost, sometimes we'll do the pre-proposal period or pre-proposal conference. It's only mandatory when it becomes something that we want the contractors to come to the site and see, because at the end of the day, they're gonna be responsible for whatever it is that they, usually when there's a site visit, we tend to make it mandatory. Otherwise, it's not. But I would tell you one trick that they use. We see who attends those pre-bid conference, because once you attend the pre-bid conference, your name is already on that list. Your signing information. So anything that the government does by law, they have to send it to the list of proposers that either pull out the documents, what you call the bidding documents, or have or showed interest in the project. So now let's say you don't show up in the pre-bid conference, you're not anywhere, but you saw that RFP, you said, oh my God, this is something my company can do. And so you and your team take off starting to work on that RFP. Never check the website. And you could have not received the email to let you know that there was a change. And at the end of the day, even if it was one addendum that was issued, and it could have been an addendum that was issued to change a word as to is, that's how simple it could be for an addendum, or it could be an addendum that actually make changes to that RFP. And you because even as part of the requirements under special conditions or term and conditions, they let you know if you don't acknowledge any addendum or addenda that was issued, your proposal is null and void. Imagine you pay your staff and you stayed up to put all of this work together. And at the end of the day, the first thing that when we receive those packages, there's a checklist. And then you go down the checklist. One document is missing, it goes to the side. You're not even gonna get evaluated. So that's something to really, really think about. And then the question and answer period. Sometimes you may not have a question, but it's so important that you monitor and understand, other people would ask questions, and by law, the government has to publish it to everybody. Even if I ask the question, they cannot just send it to me. They have to send it to all interested parties. That's how they would refer to the pools of contractors that are ready to bid on that project. And again, it's your responsibility to monitor the site for any changes, because if you don't even acknowledge an addendum, your whole process is done. So I like to kind of touch on the price also. A lot of them would give you a page of how they want you to submit this bid. Now, a lot of contracts they would call it your hourly billing rates. Now, the hourly billing rates is not what you're paying. Let's say you have a project manager on your staff that's getting, I don't know, $45 an hour because, that's a top engineer, what have you. This is not his hourly billing rate to the government. This is what your rate to pay him. And, so if you take the 45, divided by 2080, which is the number of hours that the government looks for as a full-time equivalent person, you come up with a yearly salary for that person. But what they're looking for in that unit rate, that person's salary, which we said could be the $45 an hour, overhead, fringe, operating margin, and all expenses. So usually, let's do this and then I'll go back to what I'm saying. So those prices shall be the original term and renewals. Why did I put this here? A lot of these contracts, sometimes you would see them to be 1 year term with 2 years optional or 3 year optional. And you get excited. Oh my God, this one contract can turn into a 3-year or 5-year contract. Yes, it's all good. However, a lot of them also let you know that whatever price that whatever price that you propose will be the price for the renewals also. All right. So how do you go around that? And I'm not a price person. We have one of the best consultants for price in this project if you guys want a referral. But however, when I worked in corporate, and left government, so what we would do, for example, let's say you have your top consultant is the one getting 45. So the way that the company would do it, you would look at and come up with an average weighted rate for that category. So project management, for example, if their range go anywhere from, I don't know, 35 to, if you get, to 55. So that's the range of, of somebody experience. So you always try to go with the highest middle, because what that means, if you can find somebody at like $40 an hour that is just as equipped and just as experienced as that person that, that was 45. So just do the math. This is the extra money that you can have. So you always, when you're pricing, always keep in mind, if it's a 2 or 3 year contract, they expect the from the original terms and the renewal, the prices shall remain. Now, there's a few exceptions that happens with the government. For example, when COVID hit, that was a national emergency. So if there's a national emergency, they do have provisions in the FARs that allows the government to look and do a price adjustment, but it has to really be justified. Because remember, when they're doing their budget, they're also doing multi-year budgets for these contracts. So you're not in business to lose money. And we know that the government looks for best price in everything, but you also are not in business to lose money. So you make sure that your price reflects, all your business expenses. Even the folks that have home-based business, there's business expenses that can go into your prices. So the reason I have under special conditions, a lot of their proposal would be a key personnel. So what that means, right? Like the proposer is qualified to perform the services being contracted. So you don't have a choice. I mean, you don't have a chance like we can do here to give a in-person presentation. And usually when that happens, it's when they decide that 2 or 3 companies are neck to neck and it's too good to be true on paper, they would invite, before they do the best and final offer, they would invite you for a presentation. And so that sometimes give that edge on who to give the award to. But you have to demonstrate in writing the satisfactory experience that this person has to do this work, okay? The necessary experience, personnel and facilities to support the activities associated with this proposal. So let's say, for example, like I have a home-based business. So there's certain contracts that you get, it may require that I have to go rent a business place where my key personnel have to report to that office, because the one thing the government has, they can come in at any time to review your contracts. They can come in at any time to do an audit of that contract. And even 3 to 5 years, again, the FARs should be your best bet. Whatever FAR regulation, that your contract follows, get familiar with it, please. Because sometimes 3 to 5 years after the contract is done, the government can come back and do a full audit of your contract. And if there's anything that looks murky, that's when they do further investigation. If something, they can come back and ask for that, for those funds that was paid. If anything seems, I don't want to sound like Debbie Downer, but just that's how careful you have to be when you're engaged with the government. They love transparency. They love clarity. They'll, and if you don't have something, you don't have it. Sometimes they make exception, or sometimes they'll tell you what we need to do to get around that. But please do not try to fit into what the government wants. That's never a good idea. So sometimes you'll have a key personnel clause in your contract, meaning that whoever, this person is that individual that they want to be involved in that project. Now it could be, let's say, for example, George Frager is our key personnel for this project. And what right before contract award, Judge won the Mega Million. And Judge like, I'm done with this working hard of this thing. As long as, and it could be the day that the contract happens, either that person has a medical emergency or that person, you know, gets a windfall. You have to immediately, what I always say, don't have one key personnel. Yeah, you propose one, and that they have to be the one. The department has to accept it, but always have a number 2 personnel, because in case something happened with that person, the replacement has to be equal or better. And still, it will take the department to decide whether that person, okay? So individual whose qualification are presented will be committed to the project for the direction unless accepted by the department project manager. So the project manager on the government side is, you know, you have them on speed dialing, you have their email, anything in that contract, any changes that you suspect may happen, have open communications with them, because they don't want surprises as much as you don't want to get caught with something that, oh my God, I didn't know I had to do this. Let them know, and then they'll figure things out. But your key personnel, they expect that person to be there. If it's a 2-year contract or 3-year contract, that person to be there for the duration of that contract. And if you have to change key personnel, you have to send all the criteria on that person, all their background, you know, schooling, experience, and what have you, until you get that okay in writing from the government that says, yes, you can replace George by Barbara. You can do that. So, and then that's gonna be, you know, your defect on the contract, because contract compliance and management is the key. And I'm gonna touch on that at the end. I probably do need to do that. So even your proposal format, they let you know exactly what is it that they want you to do. So they want this proposal in 2 parts. You have your technical proposal, always have your number. The proposal number is a key. That's like that social security number for that project. So the reason they ask these in separate is because usually when it's an RFP, the technical portion gets evaluated. So as part of the contracting group, so we have to let ask the technical person that gave us the request for that commodity to please find the experts in this field. And sometimes we use government and corporate experts. These people don't know you. They're like the blind judges. They don't know you from Jump Street. And a lot of times we would even take out the name of the companies. Okay, and all they're looking at is that technical portion. Or well have you responded to what the technical, and that's where they give you the score. This is the most important part to look on. Yeah, the price is good, and you're gonna see there's the method to the madness at the end, why the technical proposal is like this either makes you or break you. And again, on the price, when we went back and saw the negotiations, where the technical portion usually is non-negotiable, the price could be negotiable. And yeah, so they're gonna let you know. They want it on 8.5 by 11. That's what they want. You may use 8.5 by 14 where it's appropriate, but it shouldn't be more than 5% of the total number of pages. And that's how critical and detail-oriented things are. So let's say if a lot of times they would tell you that the proposal cannot exceed more than 25 pages, for example. So let's say 25 pages is the key number. So 5% of 25 would be the only one that could have, and that's why sometimes you could have those exhibit stuff that goes longer than 8.5 by 11, but they don't want to spend time reading a dissertation. They don't want to spend time looking at graphic stuff. They want you to get to the meat and of this proposal for them to answer. And a lot of them even tell you the point font. Because you know, some people, oh my God, we received a proposal one time that was like 6 or 8 because they were trying to put so much verbiage in there to meet the page requirement. So they use such a small font that it made no sense. And this year is so, sorry, I forgot when I did it. So important. We have seen when this proposal that we've received, they put it in those fancy binders with those fancy graphics and visual stuff. Trust and believe. And you know what we say? Oh my God, this company could have hired a special consultant to help them word the technical proposal, like either a technical writer or somebody, instead of spending money in elaborate special brochures, artwork, expensive paper. All of that go to the trash. Presentation aid, they are not necessary or desired. They're definitely not desired. So it's keep it simple, keep it where when they turn off, you know, they're able to understand, and you're following the tab. You follow the instructions. That's the key for you to even get, you know, to even get considered. And something else is, it's your job to make sure that the bid is delivered in the proper place on or before. When we were in the government, they used to always tell us, early is on time is late. If the proposal is due at 3 p.m., please don't try to rush out of your car at 2:45 or at 2:30. Because you know, for Miami-Dade County, we used to have to receive the bids at the clerk's office downtown. We could not even get close to the bids. They had to go to the clerk's office on the 3rd floor. One time, this guy was 1 minute late because the one elevator he was trying to get into closed. By the time he wait for the next elevator, and then it at 3, God is my witness, 3.01, they gave it back to him. So it doesn't matter if you have to give it the day before, because if you work on a proposal that long, you shouldn't have anything to do the day off. So it's super, super important that it's due, you know, you come on time. For any reason, if it's not delivered, it will not be considered, period. Even, you know, there was a thing that I remember FedEx one time, the plane, something happened with it, and a lot of proposals went down. Guess what? Yeah, it's God's, an act of God, but there was nothing the government official can do. So the reason I was emphasizing on the technical proposal, for example, a lot of them would even give you the criteria for them to evaluate that proposal. Guess what? Your technical proposal is 100 points. So the biggest thing, your management and your technical plan, please, you have to explain to them, you know, we understand this is the issue or this is the problem that is trying to be solved. So your executive summary, you know, doesn't have to be long, but like Adriana said, to the point of what your company does, you know, why should they look at you versus all those other 15 people that are bidding for this job? The management plan. How are you gonna manage this project? And that's usually, you have to have like a schedule, because I love to see a delivery of schedule. So, you know, if we have to have monthly reports every month, or you have to give, and I believe the one that you guys are reviewing is asking for a draft report and a final report. So a timeline of when, and then including the review time, all that lets we understand that this company really understand, you know, what we asking for and how they plan to deliver it. Your technical plan is how are you gonna technically solve this problem that we're asking for. And I think that the one that you guys are reviewing has to do with a study of all the environment, you know, companies. So how is this technically responding to what we are asking for? Again, the work plan. How do you plan to, how is all this gonna get together? We have to be able to see on paper, the same way that we put the criteria, that we need a study of all the environmental places in the state of Florida, blah, blah, blah. So now you're gonna explain to me all the agencies and what each agency, what the lack of this agency is, because maybe this agency may need something more than this one. These are the kind of things where anybody that can look at this proposal can understand, you know, that it makes sense to follow the proposal. Against, you know, your price is only 20%. I mean, I'm not minimizing it, but when you look at 100% versus 20, and this year, you know, again, the criteria for the price evaluation is gonna be, you know, so the low price in the proposer's price, right? So wherever the low price is, and then the biggest thing is the proposer's awarded points. This is where, you know, if you score high here, I can almost guarantee you. So let's say, for example, right, in this section, you have two companies that that score, we'll say 85. So 85 here, and plus this 20 points, so that gives you 105. So if I myself, as a woman certified firm, has the same as your regular small business person, and they can really go line by line, that I can, you know, deliver as well as this guy, the probability of me getting that contract goes a little bit higher, because they still, even though this is not, they didn't put it just for small certified business, but remember, it's in the government's interest to do business with a small firm, and then when you're certified, they get to check the different boxes on you. So that's why it's always good to not only be good at what you do, to be able to you know, answer and get the highest points, but also when you have your, you know, you're registered as a vendor with them, you have your appropriate certifications where it matters, those things help your profile. So and that usually on terms and conditions. So again, any change, you cannot make any changes on any RFP. That's why in the beginning, they would have an open question period. They always have an open questions, and they would close that window. So if it's something that you're really interested in, go to the website, download your statement of work, download your special conditions, download your terms and conditions, because that's where all of the what you call it, that's where all of the meat of the of what you need to know is gonna be, right? So any condition placed on any aspect of the proposal that by the proposer, which would be us, may result in the proposal being rejected. Yeah, you cannot decide, oh, you know what, I saw something that, so now you're gonna write in, you know, I'm taking exception to this special condition because that's gonna take you out. You cannot write any changes on the RFP, because if there was a concern, that's something you should have brought up to the contracting people in the beginning, and they will have issued an addenda to be able to clarify. The only changes are made through addendum or addenda, period. And it's only made by the contracting office. Now, as a proposer, you could bring that to them. Say, you know what? As I was reading this, I'm so sorry, my doctor's calling. I'm gonna have to not take it. As I was reading this, I saw that there was some kind of I see there was some kind of you know, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back. And you know, so we cannot make any changes. That's super important. Let me see. Yeah, and one thing you don't want, after you work on a proposal, for it to be rejected for something other than, you know, you're not meeting the requirements or what have we. So what are our takeaways today? Our takeaways are the micro purchase threshold. And I really emphasize, you guys, if you can just start looking into micro purchase or find out which agency that you're mostly interested in, and that you could, you know, start looking at how they issue their micro purchase. If you find a vendor or contracting officer, sometimes you can reach out to them and they can, you know, I know the school board, Miami-Dade County School Board is pretty good at them directing you to the person that is assigned to your commodity. So we talked about the simplified acquisition threshold. So these are like your, you know, pre-qualified pools. These are usually, you know, they call them blanket purchase orders, where they've already negotiated all the terms and all the conditions. All they got to do is get and get the stuff from you when they need it. Your RFQ is only when they need they already know what they want. They just need what price that you're gonna be quoting, and usually the lead time. So what they would look, so let's say you know, I could have a good price, but my manufacturer won't be able to deliver maybe 3 or 4 weeks. Then somebody that has a slightly higher price, but that can their lead time is shorter. As long as the contracting officer, you can write the justification of why you're going with this person. You could say, you know what, this is for the school systems, their inventory is low. We don't know if we can wait for the 3 weeks lead time. We're gonna go with this slightly higher person because they can deliver in 2 weeks. So all of those things, you have to be the master of your craft and be aware of all of these things, you know, with your manufacturer, depending if you have a product, get, you know, close and personal with them. Just don't go to them when you have that need. And sometimes as a small business, maybe you can negotiate net 45 with them if you have net 40 with the government, so you know you're not add too much on your, you know, on your own money. So, and then we like so the RFP is always a detail for complex purchases. It evaluates your technical expertise. And as you can see, price is always the last one. So technical expertise and past experiences. That's why in an RFP, that you would always find as part of the special conditions, the reference, you know, a reference page. And believe it or not, when you're being considered for that award, we have somebody on staff that calls these references. That's why it's your responsibility to make sure that the number that's in your reference is still working. It could be somebody that you worked with 3 or 4 years ago. You're gonna take the time and call that agency. And oh, you know what? Myrtha Wroy got promoted, or Myrtha Wroy retired. Oh, by the way, I did a project with Myrtha Wroy some years ago, and I've got or I'll go back and say that before I forget. Now, any project you do with the government, it's a good idea to ask for a reference or to ask them for a letter of recommendation, because that's what you show off, like your certification. At the end of the day, this is what you're gonna show to prove that, yes, I have done this work for, you know, for the State Department. I have done this work for the prison. And this is, you know, this is what I have. And so now when you would call and they said, you know, Myrtha Wroy no longer works there. Oh, can you please, if they call, who would they ask for? Because it's in the government database. Because, you know, it's also a mandate on us, government officials, to put in how the contractor did at the end of the day. Okay, so if you guys were one of these people that were not responsive with for phone calls, all of that is recorded. They may have not told you anything because they wanted that contract to be done. And I would, you know, it's always good when they come back and ask, you know, how did I do on this contract? Would you mind writing? So I just want to, you know, do something better, or how can I improve? So that's how you approach the vendors. And then there are people on staff that will help, you know, to give you those references. Those references are critical, you know, for your capability statement, because you have to put the government entities that you've had work with. I don't know if there's any questions. We're at the end.